Hello everyone, Santier here, and today I want to talk a little bit about the game I've been working on, Psychopomps Are Missing. I've often put a disclaimer at the front of those videos that says, in part, everything is subject to change. This video is about why everything is subject to change, because everything is being subjected to a lot of change right now. I think it's important to sort of set the baseline for some of this history. So I've been wanting to make something in RPG Maker MV for a while, and then set it aside. No particular. RPG Maker MV is, I think, a very fantastic tool, or any of the RPG Maker games are a very fantastic tool for specific purposes and specific ways of being used. And the things that I want to do are, in general, are a bit outside of what works well in those. So I eventually want to move to another platform that lets me do better things with lighting and AI. And more of a tactics-based design for the game. But that's future stuff. And you could theoretically do all that sort of stuff in RPG Maker if you really wanted to put in the work to it, but then you're just going to be fighting the editor every step of the way, and that's no fun. So anyway, I've been wanting to make something in RPG Maker MV. I've dabbled with a number of smaller things that never really went anywhere, and then I decided, I'm really going to try to make something, and that started with Astral Collision. But Astral Collision had quite a few problems with it. I don't know how many people are familiar with it. There's a playlist to where I was working on it that you can find on this channel. And I go into why I stopped working on that particular thing. Remember to stay hydrated, folks. And that game just, it ran into some design issues, but also just wasn't being true enough to me. So I started working on Psychopomps Are Missing. Had a much better design, had a lot of stuff working out really, really well with it at first. But then I ran into what I've realized recently is the design is just way too complicated. It's too much, it's too big. As I've been using as a bit of a metaphor, it's like I was trying to make an entire amusement park, and I should just focus on a carnival ride. So I've been refocusing to try to pull down the scope. This is one of those things where scope in game design is really, really hard to get right. By which I mean it's very easy to go too much. It's very easy to have the scope of a game just completely run away from you. And you end up trying to make way too much game. And that was beginning to happen. In fact, the plans for Psychopomps Are Missing very much so emphasize that. I have a bunch of articles that I've put on my blog. A bunch is maybe a bit of an exaggeration. But it describes the progress through the game. And a lot of areas just hadn't been touched, quite frankly. There's a lot of game left to make. Just an absolute vast quantity. And at the same time, I was getting bogged down in trying to make skills and trying to figure out how to make the combat system balance the way that I want. And it was the design. I had a conversation with a friend. This is why it's really important to have people you can talk to. I had a conversation with a friend and another bit of a conversation on Twitter with someone else. And the basic gist of the conversations was the scope had gotten away from me, and I now have the knowledge to be able to do what I wanted to do with the design. So a couple of things. Let me just highlight those. So many of you may know I'm a big fan of Guild Wars 1. You can find a bunch of videos on this channel of that game. And in particular, I really like the build system of the game, where you have specific attribute levels and you're slotting in skills. It's great. Didn't know how to do that in RPG Maker. There's a couple of things that I was running into as significant problems. I could immediately come up with the idea of, okay, let's have skills slot to equipment slots. That's an obvious way of working that sort of system. Except that I ran into this little problem called, I don't want to have to duplicate every single armor that would have the skill attached for every one of those slots. Like, I can't have skill slot 1, skill slot 2, skill slot 3. I have, as you may have seen, if you've been following Psychopomps Are Missing, figured out how to just insert more copies of the exact same equipment slot type. So, like, I had gotten to the point with the design where it's like, I have 2 different accessory slots and 4 ring slots and rules about what sort of things can go in there. I think it was actually pretty neat. But And by the way, if you were curious in where Psychopomps Are Missing kind of has gotten up to this point, you can go to my Discord server. There are, in the, I think it's the game development channel, there are some links to download a couple different iterations of it. But I was running into... So I made a video recently about skill frameworks. This was another sort of issue that I was running into, where I had a bunch of different equipment that had skills on it, and then I had all these character classes that had some skills in them, and it was just a big mess in terms of how you acquire skills and what skills you'd have access to and all sorts of things. It had gotten very complicated. So that was overwrought. I really wanted to do something more like the Guild Wars 1 skill system, or another game that's been a big inspiration for Psychopomps Are Missing has been Pokemon. And if you know anything about Pokemon, you know that each Pokemon has a limit of 4 skills. There's some important value to this because it means that you're having to make choices. You're having to make choices about what skills you're going to actually be using. One Pokemon can't do a bunch of different things. And one of the things that was becoming a problem in Psychopomps Are Missing, and I try to scale it back, but it still is a problem, is just too many skills doing too many different things and trying to find different niches for skills. And it was just becoming arduous to work in that sort of system. I had no framework. I had no sense of like identity because the classes had identities of what sort of skills they had, but that filled up so quickly. Like there's only 5 skill slots per class, and yes, there's a bunch of classes. That's a bunch of skills. It's like what, 210 skills, but it's not that many overall in the system, and it's just running into difficulties with that, with trying to manage the number of skills that you have access to. So I figured out how to have multiple equipment slots, and the character stat system is also fairly similar to what I might do for attributes, for something that's more Guild Wars-like, more like Guild Wars 1. And so I think that I can achieve something that does a build system more like what I want. It'll be simpler, more straightforward, less equipment, no skills on equipment, it'll allow the sort of combinatorics that I like and enjoy, but in the way that I enjoy it, and not the growing mess that that I felt the design had become. So I should just state it up front. Like, I'm reworking Psychopomps Are Missing. Everything is subject to change. I want to stop trying to make an amusement park, and I want to make a carnival ride. There's a lot of pieces from that amusement park that I can put into the carnival ride, but I want something that's smaller, less complicated, and most importantly, completable. And one of the big key things is that I'm only going to have one world. Because I kept doing the Astro Collision and Psychopomps Are Missing did the exact same thing. And what it is it's wanting to use every piece of the buffalo, if I may use that metaphor. I mean, I just did. There's nothing we can do about it retrospectively. But RPG Maker MV has 2 major sets of tile sets, with their like standard fantasy set and then their sci-fi more modern-y set. And what that would run into as a problem for me is I wanted to use both. And so I would create multiple different worlds that had all mashed together in order to justify having both tile sets involved. And I'm like, I don't need to do this. I can just use both in one world. And so I'm going to do something that's one world instead of 9, 10, 11, depending upon how you want to count things. Psychopomps Are Missing, because there's the 8 main areas, but one of those is actually 2 areas. Idenmuth and Norafrage, with the mixed up locations. So that's 9. And then the Abyss was going to be kind of its own major area. The Wandering Woods is kind of a minor area, but it's its own thing. Pocket Dimension stuff, there's just a lot going on. Another big thing that I've realized is that I am not as enthused about character writing. Like me as a creative individual, I'm much more interested in world building. And characters are important to me. I kind of put plot last if I'm rating the 3 things of world building, character, and plot. I put them in that order. Where, like, characters have to work pretty well and stuff, but and like plot doesn't. It's not like plot doesn't matter, but world building is where I'm really enthusiastic about stuff. And I was just getting myself in a place where I had plans for doing stuff with characters. There was this whole problem, because one of the things that's really important to me from a game design standpoint, it's this marriage between what I call Narvazod and mechanics. So Narvazod is it's a little hard to summarize, but it's short for narrative visual audio. It's what are you doing with sound effects and sound design and music and all of that? What are you doing with your visuals? So what sort of graphical style are you using? What sort of stylistic elements are you using? How are you presenting things? Art style, all that, actual assets, animations, and all this sort of stuff. And then there is narrative, which encompasses the idea of like the main plot and lore and character development, and all this sort of stuff. It's a pretty broad swath of things, but it stands as it stands paired with mechanics. So they work together to support like a singular concept. So you have a concept, and that gets expressed through Narvazodal elements and the mechanical elements. So I want those two elements, the Narvazod elements and the mechanical elements, to support each other and to be strong together. So one of the ways that I wanted to do this is to have the characters have character development moments that would be reflected in skills that they'd get. So a good example of this sort of thing is Johannes had a healing skill called Hug, because he likes hugging people. And so that was a healing skill. And then he'd get other skills as he develops. So you start off with sort of like baseline. And another example is Montana. Montana had very strong personal boundaries. She had a skill called Personal Boundary that worked as a block. So there's just, you could go down each one of those characters. They each had something that kind of represented where they were to some extent in some way. And they would get, the idea is that at various moments, something would happen narratively, and they would get access to a skill. But here's the thing, right, is the classes could just be whatever. You could do whatever you wanted. And so finding skills that could work on any class and represented the character's moment was going to be really hard, and that was not something I was looking forward to. And now I don't have to, because I am changing things. Everything is subject to change, and everything is being subjected to change. So what I'm shifting towards is leaning much more heavily on sort of the intersection between Pokemon and Guild Wars 1. So if you like those games, there's probably going to be something in the combat system that you'll enjoy. Combat and build system. So the combat system is going to be a bit more Pokemon. The build system is going to be a bit more Guild Wars 1. It's kind of where things are going to lean, just because I think those work well. And it gives me a framework around which to build skills, which is super important. And it's also, I'm going to be addressing a lot of things that were causing difficulties with balance and simplifying things a lot overall. And that means it's going to be a much more achievable thing. But I wanted to let people know that this was what was happening. This is where things were going earlier than the next quarterly update, which is September? July, August, September? Yeah, I think so, because the last one just came out in June. So big changes on the horizon, but I am excited about them. I think it'll make a much more achievable project, and it'll be much easier to play, I think, because it'll be significantly less complicated, I hope. That is the plan. So hopefully I am successful in sort of reducing that and making it something that can actually be accomplished. I thank you all very much for watching. Like I said, everything is subject to change. Hopefully this isn't subject to too much change, but I was thinking about that with Psychopomps going in off of Astral Collision. And then I made the design way too complicated. But I learned each time. That's the thing, is I've learned each time, and I want to apply those lessons going forward. Not only with stuff in RPG Maker, but games going on after that. So thank you all for watching, and until next time, everyone, take care, and goodbye.